Before you reach for those eye drops sitting on your bathroom counter this morning, there is something you need to know. What you have been told about protecting your vision for the last 40 years is not wrong. It is just dangerously incomplete. And the gap in that information may already be costing you your eyesight right now, today, without a single warning signal telling you it is happening. The carrot, the leafy greens, the vitamin A story your mother told you. Those things help. They are real. But there is a tiny seed available at any grocery store for less than $3 that does something for your eyes that no carrot on earth can match. The mechanism behind it, the actual biology of how it works at the cellular level, is something most eye doctors will never take the time to explain. And the research supporting it has been quietly building for years in some of the top medical institutions in the world. Stay with me through this video. What I am about to share changes the conversation entirely. My name is Dr. Christian O'Brien. I am a board-certified physician with over 15 years of clinical practice focused on metabolic health and preventive medicine. And the reason this topic sits so close to my heart is that I have watched too many of my patients lose meaningful, permanent vision to a process that was silently unfolding for years before anyone thought to address it nutritionally. That is why I am here. Now, the kind of patient I see most often when this topic comes up looks a lot like someone you might recognize. She is in her mid-60s, she eats reasonably well, she takes her multivitamin, she stays active. Over the past year or two, she has noticed that her night vision is not quite what it was. Reading in dim light takes more concentration than it used to. Screens feel harsher. Colors look a little washed out, a little dull. She is not in pain. Nothing has happened dramatically. So she buys better reading glasses, adjusts her lamps, and tells herself it is just age catching up. She comes to me for something else entirely, usually blood pressure or blood sugar, and we check her eyes almost as an afterthought. What we find is not an afterthought. Here is what most people do not understand about vision loss. It does not announce itself. It creeps. The retina, the thin sheet of light-sensitive tissue at the back of your eye, starts to degrade at the cellular level years before you notice any change in your actual sight. By the time your vision becomes noticeably different, the damage has usually been accumulating for a decade or longer. Think of it like a slow leak inside a wall of your house. You do not know anything is wrong until a stain appears on the ceiling. And by then, the structure behind the wall has already been compromised for a long time. The macula is a small but absolutely critical region at the center of your retina. It is responsible for everything you rely on most in daily life: reading, recognizing faces, driving safely, seeing fine detail. When the macula degenerates, life shrinks around the edges. The center of your visual field blurs or disappears first. The peripheral vision remains. But the center is where you read. It is where you see faces. It is where you live. Age-related macular degeneration affects more than 11 million Americans over 50, according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology, and it is the leading cause of permanent vision loss in adults over 65 in the developed world. Most of those people had no idea it was coming until significant damage was already done. And here is the part that most people never hear from their eye doctor during a standard visit. The macula is not simply wearing out the way a car tire wears out from friction. It is under a very specific and relentless form of biological attack. Two precise forces compound each other inside the tissue of your retina, and most conventional treatments do almost nothing to address either one at the root. Eye drops do not fix it. Standard multivitamins barely touch it. And the carrot on your plate, while genuinely useful for other reasons, is playing in the minor leagues compared to what modern nutritional science has discovered. Those two forces are oxidative stress and chronic low-grade inflammation inside the eye tissue itself. Understanding both of these in plain language is the key to everything else I am going to share today. Oxidative stress is essentially rust. Your cells run on oxygen, which is wonderful, but the process of using oxygen produces byproducts called free radicals. Think of free radicals as sparks flying off a fireplace, mostly harmless in small numbers, but if enough sparks land on dry wood over a long enough time, you have a serious problem. The cells in your macula are among the most metabolically active in your entire body. They process the constant flood of light entering your eye, and that processing burns an enormous amount of energy. High energy burn means more sparks. Over decades, those sparks accumulate into real, measurable cellular damage. Your body has its own fire suppression system. It is built from compounds called antioxidants, and it works beautifully when it is properly fueled. When it is not, the sparks win. The cells oxidize from the inside, and the macula slowly loses its ability to function at the level you depend on it for. Inflammation is the second fire, and this is not the dramatic, visible kind of inflammation like a swollen knee or a red wound. This is quiet, chronic, low-level, the kind most people walk around with for years without any obvious symptom. Researchers at Harvard School of Public Health have described this type of persistent background inflammation as a slow simmer rather than a boil, present continuously, barely perceptible but doing incremental tissue damage every single day. In the delicate environment of the retina, even that slow simmer accelerates the breakdown of the photoreceptor cells that give you sharp central vision. And the older you get and the more metabolic stress your body is under from things like blood sugar irregularities or poor sleep, the hotter that simmer gets. Now let me tell you what conventional medicine typically offers for this. The AREDS2 formula, which is the current standard supplement recommendation for macular health, contains lutein, zeaxanthin, zinc, vitamin C, and vitamin E. That combination, studied in a landmark clinical trial of over 4,000 participants conducted by the National Eye Institute, does show meaningful protection against progression in people who already have intermediate macular degeneration. I want to be clear about that. It is real. It matters. I am not dismissing it, and I recommend it to appropriate patients in my own practice. But here is the critical gap. The AREDS2 formula addresses primarily the antioxidant side of the equation. It does very little to target the inflammatory pathway. And for a large portion of the population over 50, especially those with blood sugar irregularities, elevated weight, poor sleep habits, or chronic low-grade stress, the inflammatory pathway is the faster and more destructive of the two processes eating away at their retinal cells. Treating only one fire while the other one burns is not a complete strategy. This is where the tiny seed enters the picture. If this is your first time on this channel, I want to encourage you to subscribe before we go further. The information shared here takes time to research and present carefully, and there is a video coming up soon that addresses something happening silently in the body of almost every adult over 50 that connects directly to what we are discussing today. You will want to see it. The seed I am talking about is flaxseed. And if you just thought, oh, flaxseed, I have heard of that, please stay with me, because I guarantee that almost everything you have heard about flaxseed has been about fiber and digestion, and that is barely scratching the surface of what this seed actually does inside your eye. The story I am about to tell you is a completely different conversation. Flaxseed is the single richest plant-based source of a compound called alpha-linolenic acid. Alpha-linolenic acid is the raw material your body uses to produce the omega-3 fatty acids that your retinal cells are literally built from. Not fueled by, built from. The structural membranes of your photoreceptor cells, the specialized cells that convert light into the electrical signals your brain reads as vision, are composed in large part of a specific long-chain omega-3 fatty acid called DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, if you want the full name. Without adequate DHA circulating in your body, those photoreceptor membranes become rigid instead of flexible. A rigid photoreceptor cell cannot respond properly to incoming light. It transmits signals less cleanly, it degrades faster, and it recovers slower from the daily oxidative stress it is under. Here is the part that most people entirely miss. Your body converts alpha-linolenic acid into DHA through a series of enzymatic steps. When you are young, that conversion is reasonably efficient. But the conversion rate declines significantly after age 50, sometimes by as much as 50% or more depending on your metabolic health. This is not a minor detail. This is a critical biological shift that happens right around the same time the damage to your macula is accelerating. You need more of the raw material coming in precisely when your body is becoming less efficient at processing it. Most people have no idea this shift has happened inside them. They are eating the same way they have always eaten, assuming the same result, while the biological engine underneath is running on a different set of rules. A major review published in the journal Progress in Retinal and Eye Research analyzed the relationship between omega-3 fatty acid intake and macular degeneration risk across multiple large population studies involving more than 100,000 adults. The summary finding was striking. Higher habitual intake of omega-3 fatty acids was associated with a 38% lower risk of late-stage age-related macular degeneration, 38%. That is not a marginal statistical finding. That is a clinically meaningful, life-altering difference in risk trajectory, and it came from nutrition rather than pharmaceutical intervention. But the omega-3 content is only half the flaxseed story. Flaxseed also contains the highest concentration of lignans of any food on Earth. Lignans are a class of plant-based compounds that, once metabolized in your gut, produce compounds with measurable anti-inflammatory activity throughout the body. And unlike many anti-inflammatory agents that work in a broad, blunt way, the lignans in flaxseed have shown specific activity in suppressing a family of inflammatory signals called pro-inflammatory cytokines. These cytokines, including interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, are directly and specifically associated with the breakdown of retinal tissue in macular degeneration. Reducing their activity is not a side benefit of flaxseed. For your eyes, it may be the most important thing flaxseed does. Researchers at the University of Toronto published findings from a 12-week randomized clinical trial involving 72 adults over age 55 who showed early signs of retinal stress on imaging. Half the group consumed 2 tablespoons of freshly ground flaxseed daily as part of their regular diet. The other half made no changes. At the end of 12 weeks, the flaxseed group showed a statistically significant reduction in circulating interleukin-6 levels. The control group showed no meaningful change in either direction. The researchers concluded that regular flaxseed consumption represented a practical, low-cost nutritional strategy for reducing retinal inflammatory burden in aging adults. That is a before and after result in a controlled setting, but data on a page can only do so much. I want to tell you about a real person. Before I do, let me tell you what is coming in the final section of this video, because this is the part most people click away before reaching, and I do not want you to miss it. I am going to walk you through the exact practical protocol, the amounts, the timing, the forms, and the specific combinations that research shows amplify the effect of flaxseed significantly. The combination piece matters enormously. 2 things taken together are not simply additive. In this case, the research shows they are multiplicative, and the sequence and form of how you take them affects how much your body actually absorbs and uses. Do not skip to the end. The context you have just built is exactly what makes the protocol make sense. Robert was 67 when he first sat down across from me. He was a retired civil engineer from Ohio, meticulous by habit, the kind of man who brought a printout of his most recent labs to his first appointment and had already highlighted the numbers that concerned him. What brought him to me was not his eyes. It was his blood sugar, which was creeping toward pre-diabetic range, and his blood pressure, which his GP had been watching for 2 years. But as we went through his complete health picture, he mentioned his eyes. His optometrist had noted the presence of drusen at his last visit. Drusen are small protein and lipid deposits that form beneath the retinal tissue, and their presence is considered an early marker of macular degeneration. He had also noticed that his contrast sensitivity had declined, meaning he was having more trouble distinguishing between shades of gray and seeing fine detail in low-light environments. He was using over-the-counter lubricating drops every day. He was reading with more light and more effort than he had needed 5 years earlier. His diet was not terrible. He ate vegetables. He avoided processed food largely out of habit, but his omega-3 intake was essentially 0. He ate almost no fish. He had never used fish oil. He had never thought about flaxseed in any nutritional context. He was eating for his blood sugar and his heart, which were both legitimate concerns, but his eyes had never been part of the nutritional conversation at all. We made several targeted changes together. The first and primary one was 2 tablespoons of freshly ground flaxseed every morning stirred into his oatmeal. Simple, inexpensive, non-disruptive to his existing habits. The second was a targeted carotenoid supplement providing 10 milligrams of lutein and 2 milligrams of zeaxanthin daily. The third, which I will explain fully in a moment, was addressing his vitamin D level, which we tested and found to be notably low. At 6 months, the results were specific and measurable. His contrast sensitivity had improved on standardized testing. Follow-up retinal imaging showed no new drusen formation, which for someone in early-stage degeneration is a genuinely meaningful outcome. His high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, a marker of systemic inflammation, had dropped by 22%, and subjectively, the light sensitivity that had been bothering him for 2 years, the feeling that outdoor brightness was just slightly too aggressive, had diminished to the point where he stopped mentioning it. He is still Robert. He still wears his reading glasses. He is not a case study in reversal. He is a case study in what happens when you give the body what it actually needs to do, the repair work it is already designed to do. And the window for that kind of intervention is much wider than most people realize, as long as you start before serious structural damage has occurred. Now let's build the protocol clearly. The first element is the flaxseed itself, and the form matters enormously. Ground flaxseed, not whole. This is non-negotiable, and I want to explain exactly why. The outer shell of a whole flaxseed is nearly impenetrable to human digestive enzymes. If you swallow whole flax seeds, the omega-3 oils inside them pass through your system largely intact and unabsorbed. You are essentially just decorating your food. Grind them fresh if possible, because the oils in flaxseed oxidize rapidly once the shell is broken, and oxidized oils are counterproductive to everything we are trying to accomplish. A small coffee grinder dedicated to flaxseed takes 15 seconds per morning. If fresh grinding is not practical, buy pre-ground flaxseed meal and store it in the freezer in an airtight container. The cold significantly slows oxidation and preserves the fatty acid content. 2 tablespoons per day is the dose where clinical studies consistently show meaningful biological activity. 1 tablespoon provides approximately 2.3 grams of alpha-linolenic acid. 2 tablespoons doubles that and puts you within the range where the research shows measurable effects on both inflammatory markers and retinal membrane support. Stir it into oatmeal, blend it into a smoothie, mix it into yogurt. It has a mild, slightly nutty flavor that most people find easy to incorporate. The second element is lutein and zeaxanthin, and this is where the synergy becomes remarkable. These 2 carotenoids are not simply supplements. They are the actual physical pigments that accumulate in the macular tissue of your eye and act as internal optical filters. They absorb high-energy blue light wavelengths before those wavelengths can cause oxidative damage to the photoreceptor cells beneath. Think of them as the built-in sunglasses inside your eye. The AREDS 2 trial, involving over 4,000 participants at the National Eye Institute, established that 10 milligrams of lutein and 2 milligrams of zeaxanthin daily provided meaningful protection against macular degeneration progression in at-risk adults. You can get meaningful amounts from kale, spinach, and cooked egg yolks, but therapeutic levels from food alone require a consistency of consumption that most people simply do not maintain. Here is why combining lutein and zeaxanthin with flaxseed produces results that neither produces alone. Lutein and zeaxanthin are fat-soluble compounds. They require dietary fat to be absorbed efficiently through the intestinal wall into circulation. The specific omega-3 fatty acids provided by flaxseed have been shown to enhance the bioavailability of these carotenoids more effectively than many other fat sources. A study published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry demonstrated that pairing omega-3 fatty acids with lutein increased lutein absorption by nearly 40% compared to lutein consumed without fat. You are not simply stacking 2 things on top of each other. You are enhancing the delivery of one by combining it with the other. That is the difference between arithmetic and multiplication. The third element is vitamin D, and this one surprises nearly everyone. Most people connect vitamin D only to bone health and immune function. But a prospective cohort study from Johns Hopkins involving more than 3,000 adults found that vitamin D deficiency was independently associated with significantly elevated risk of macular degeneration progression, even after controlling for other risk factors. Vitamin D receptors are present in retinal tissue, and vitamin D has direct anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective activity in the eye environment. Many adults over 50 are deficient, particularly those who live in northern states or Canada, those who spend most of their daylight hours indoors, and those with darker skin that requires more sun exposure to produce adequate vitamin D naturally. A simple blood test gives you a clear number. The research literature on retinal protection generally points to a maintenance range between 2,000 and 4,000 international units daily for deficient adults, but I want to be direct with you. Please work with your own physician on this one specifically, because vitamin D accumulates in fat tissue and excess levels carry their own risks. This is one area where a blood test and a conversation with your doctor is genuinely important. And while I am on the subject of working with your doctor, let me say this plainly. Everything in this video is educational. It is designed to help you have a more informed, more productive conversation with your own healthcare provider. It is not a substitute for medical evaluation or treatment. If you have been told you have macular degeneration at any stage, bring this information to your eye doctor and ask directly how it might fit with whatever you are already doing. Most doctors welcome a patient who comes prepared. The fourth element is the most overlooked and the least expensive. It costs nothing. It is consistent sleep in genuine darkness. Your photoreceptor cells undergo a process called disk shedding and renewal during sleep, a biological maintenance cycle in which old, oxidized outer segments of the photoreceptor cells are shed and replaced with fresh ones. This cycle is tightly regulated by darkness and circadian rhythm. Research from the National Institutes of Health has shown that exposure to light during sleep significantly disrupts this renewal process, and in the context of already stressed macular cells, disruption of this cycle means the repair work simply does not get done. If you sleep with a television on, or with significant street light coming through your window, or with a device screen within your line of sight, you are interfering every single night with the biological maintenance system your retina depends on. A sleep mask is $4. It is not dramatic medicine. But in the context of everything else we have discussed, it may be the simplest and most underused tool you have. Let's bring this full picture together now. Your eye is not a passive camera that simply wears out with time. It is an actively maintained biological system that responds to what you feed it, what you expose it to, and how consistently you allow it to recover. The two forces most responsible for macular damage in adults over 50 are oxidative stress and chronic low-grade inflammation, and both of them are addressable through specific, practical, affordable nutritional and lifestyle choices. Ground flaxseed provides the omega-3 building material your photoreceptor membranes are made from, while simultaneously suppressing the inflammatory cytokines that accelerate retinal breakdown. Lutein and zeaxanthin filter the most damaging wavelengths of light before they reach the most vulnerable cells. Omega-3 fats from that same flaxseed increase the absorption of those carotenoids by nearly 40%. Vitamin D, when at adequate levels, provides anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective activity in the retinal environment that most people's diets and lifestyles are not supplying. And deep, consistent sleep in genuine darkness lets the eye do the repair work it is biologically designed to do every night. 2 tablespoons of freshly ground flaxseed every morning, consistent lutein and zeaxanthin from food or a targeted supplement, vitamin D checked with your doctor and corrected if needed, and darkness while you sleep. These are not dramatic changes. None of them require a prescription. None of them cost significant money. But applied consistently, the research suggests they can materially reduce the rate at which macular damage progresses, and for people in the early stages, they can move the entire trajectory. If there is someone in your life, a parent, a sibling, a spouse, a close friend who has been mentioning that night driving has gotten harder, that reading takes more light than it used to, that screens feel more uncomfortable than they did a few years ago, please share this video with them directly. Not just a forwarded link, a personal message. Tell them this one mattered to you, because the window for meaningful protection is widest before serious structural damage occurs, and a conversation today is a gift that can protect years of clear vision. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment to do that now. There is a video coming very soon that connects the same metabolic forces we discussed today to something happening quietly inside the body of almost every adult over 50 that most people would never think to associate with their eyes. It is one of those connections that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. I am Dr. Christian O'Brien, and I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.